This video about resistant starch and how can resistant starch can help us to keep our body healthy. I made this presentation long time ago with idea to provide maybe some recipes for healthy food in Thailand. So let's go through, and I will not go through all the details. You can read presentation and see it for yourself. But okay, that's what I want to tell. That it is estimated that we have to get about 80% of energy from animal products and only 20% from plants. And in the wild, plants are not sweet, and they have low content of starches, of course. Actually, plants in the wild are sources of cellulose and crude fibers. As humans cannot digest effectively cellulose and such crude fibers, and then since agricultural revolution, people grow plants with high starch content and sugar, and also we can cook food to make starches more digestible. So in some developing countries, people are getting up to 80% of energy from sugars and starches, and instead of getting the same amount from animal food. Okay, this is a diet in developing countries which is based much on plants. Meanwhile, in 2016, and now it is even more, above 1.9 billion adults, it is 39% of men and 40% of women, are overweight. Of this overweight people, over 650 million, so 11% of men and 15% of women are obese. Now it's situation even more heavy. Okay, then again, interesting enough that most of the world population live in countries where obesity kills more people than undernutrition. So main reason of the obesity is an increased intake of the processed food that are high in refined carbohydrates and sugars in combination with seed oils that are polyunsaturated fats and concentrated toxins. Such food tends to be lower in cost but detrimental to our health. How can overweight and obesity be reduced? We have to base our diet on saturated and monounsaturated fats instead of seed oils, avoid sugars and refined carbohydrates while getting at least 20% of energy intake from proteins. While saturated and monounsaturated fats are healthy in general, combination of these fats with high intake of the refined carbohydrates is unhealthy too. Refined carbohydrates are increasing a level of insulin in our blood, and so that cells convert glucose to fat and store it. Fatty acids and triglycerides in blood do not increase the insulin level themselves, but in combination with carbohydrates, the fatty acids and triglycerides are not used as fuel but stored as fat in the cells. So it is important to avoid refined carbohydrates and seed oils in our diet and to follow a strict ketogenic diet, that is to get energy mostly from animal fats. Additionally, we can improve our health by inclusion of the dietary fiber to our diet. Dietary fiber is a type of carbohydrates that cannot be digested in the human small intestine, and instead it is passing through to the large intestine. Resistant starch, pectin, chitin, oligosaccharides such as glycolipids and indigestible dextrin are also considered as dietary fiber. We know that great apes like gorillas and orangutans eat predominantly crude fibers and have a colon of large volume wherein the fibers are converted into short-chain fatty acids by bacteria. Short-chain fatty acids are providing energy to the great apes. Despite we have much smaller total gut volume to the body mass ratio relative to the great apes and much smaller volume of the colon, we yet can get up to 20% of metabolic energy from the microbiome in our colon in the form of short-chain fatty acids. Even in a standard Western diet, main source of energy is sugars and starches, while fruits and vegetables are a source of dietary fibers, and only 10% of energy humans are supposed to get from fat, animal fat, and actually from so-called vegetable oils. The result of such a recommended diet is overweight, obesity, chronic illnesses, very high cost of medical care, especially for elders. The diet based on carbohydrates and vegetable oils is intrinsically unhealthy, even if people limit the calories intake to stay slim. This is a standard American diet, and Americans supposed to get from 6 to 11 servings a day, so they actually eating non-stop, and mostly they're getting energy as recommended from grains and tubers, and to some extent from green vegetables and fruits, and in much smaller amount from milk and animal products. And fats are limited, and especially saturated fats are restricted by recommendation of the medical professionals. But this is a completely wrong recommendation, absolutely wrong. Okay, dietary fibers can slow down digestion of carbohydrates, and therefore total recommended intake for dietary fiber is 25-40 grams per day. Dietary fibers are edible parts of plants or such carbohydrates that are resistant to digestion and absorption in the human small intestine, with complete or partial fermentation in the large intestine. Dietary fibers consist of non-starch polysaccharides, lignin-resistant starches, and non-digestible oligosaccharides. Non-starch polysaccharides include majority of cellulose and chemicelluloses. It is glucan, gums, and pectin. To improve our health, we better have to return to the natural and more healthy diet that relies mostly on saturated and monounsaturated fats as a source of energy, and we need yet dietary fibers. While population in the developed countries can include green vegetables, mushrooms, and some fresh fruits like avocado all year long, in the developing countries, poor people, especially city dwellers, do not have such luxury to eat fresh vegetables and fruits. Also, since I made this presentation, I came to the conclusion that the eating vegetables and fruits leads to hormonal imbalance. So it is, I would not recommend to do it. Okay, while fermented vegetables are relatively affordable and healthy, amount of dietary fibers can be increased by resistant starches. Let us talk about these starches and resistant starches in particular. Okay, then this ketogenic diet is assumed that you are getting 70% of energy from animal fat, 25% from protein, and only 5% from carbohydrates. Okay, starch is a polymeric carbohydrate consisting of numerous glucose units joined by glycosidic bonds. Pure starch is a white, tasteless, and odorless powder which is insoluble in cold water or alcohol. It consists of two types of molecules, the linear and helical amylose and branched amylopectin. Amylose is a linear chain of glucose with degree of polymerization 6000, whereas amylopectin is highly branched and its degree of polymerization is up to 2 million. So here we see amylose and amylopectin, different structure. Here the same amylose and amylopectin. And amylose, no, this is amylose, but it can stay in some kind of fibers. And this is amylopectin, very branched structure of molecules. Starch is the most abundant storage polysaccharide in plants and occurs as granules in the chloroplast of green leaves and the amyloplast of seeds, pulses, and tubers. Okay, we have the structure of the plant cell, and we can find out that starch is accumulated in the chloroplast, and if we make a picture, we can see these granules of starch inside the plant cells. These are the starch is stored as source of energy for plants. This is a cross section of starch granule under electron microscope. So the typical cross section of starch granule is combined from amorphous and crystalline areas, as we see here. And this is can be amylosa and amylopectin areas. Crystalline structure is amylopectin, and amorphous structure can be both amylosa and amylopectin. Resistant starch has been defined as a fraction of starch which escapes digestion in the small intestine but may be digested in the large intestine. Theoretically, resistant starch classified into 5 subtitles, and they call it like physically trapped starch, resistant starch granules, physically trapped resistant starch in granules, retrograded starch, chemically modified starch, and amylosa lipid complexes. Resistant starch has low content of energy. It is only after bacteria convert it to the short chain fatty acids, it gives only 2 kilocalories per gram in comparison to energy provided by completely digestible starch. It is 4 kilocalories per gram. And fat gives up to 9 kilocalories per gram. Okay, so we have some different kind of starches. I will not go in details because this is too much information, and we are interested only in some small portion of it. Okay, as I said, short chain fatty acids are very healthy and very good for our body, and they're mainly at acetate of the acetic acid and esters of acetic acid, propionate, so esters of the propionic acid, and butyrate. Butyrate is butyrate acid and esters of butyric acid. Acetate is carried to the liver, and then it acts as energy substrate for muscle tissue. Propionate is converted to glucose in the liver. Butyrate is used primarily by cells in the epithelium layer in our guts, and provides major source of energy for their metabolic activity as demonstrated in pigs, rats, and humans. So butyric acid and esters of butyric acid are most healthy. Short chain fatty acids can contribute, as I said, substantial energy to the gut, to the epithelium of our guts, and to the whole body of animals, including humans, and humans can get up to 10% of energy from short chain fatty acids produced by bacteria in our large intestine. Short chain fatty acids contribute to normal large bowel function and prevent pathology through their action in the lumen and in the colonic musculature and vasculature, and through the metabolism in colonocytes. So it is very healthy for our guts. Okay, so we will not go in this much because different kind of starches, and then we will just jump a little bit to my recommendation, what kind of starch we have to use. I believe that the most easy, and I tried different kind of starch, and most easy it is raw starches, which can be produced from potato and cassava. So you see here in this table, content of starch is indicated in the total starch, and total starch in the dry potatoes and dry corn, etc., and resistant starch, percentage of resistant starch from total starch. We see that potato starch have 79 and plus minus 9 percent or gram to 100 gram of total starch, so it is mostly resistant starch. And also cassava has even more content, little bit more content of the resistant starch. Actually, up to 95%. Up to 95% of tapioca or cassava starch are resistant starch. So it's highly recommended to use exactly this. And other sources of the starch are not so good. Maybe sorghum little bit. It has 43.7% of resistant starch from total starch, but the rest is not good. Corn starch absolutely not good for consumption as a source of resistant starch, and other also not good. Banana recommended, but it is, to my opinion, it is not nice, not good. Okay, then there are some different kind of starch, like there can be raw starch, and it can be thermally treated and then frozen into refrigerator for a day, and then it will be converted in part to the resistant starch. But again, I tried it and it is not too much work, but actually percentage of the starch is very low. The maximum it is like a potato roasted and cooled in the refrigerator for 24 hours. It has only 52% of resistant starch from total starch, and much more easy take just potato starch as powder, and in this case this percentage of the starch is much higher. In chemical modified starch, and also starch which is amylose lipid complex, so it is like it's possible to deep fry rice, boiled rice or steamed rice, to deep fry to fat, and then it will be converted in part to resistant starch. I tried it, actually too much work and not so good idea, I believe. So what we have, what we see, that I was thinking just can we use starches as a source of energy, and indeed while price of rice, for example, is growing and now it is higher and higher price, what we have, the tapioca starch is relatively cheap, and this can be used together with coconut oil, and so personally what I am doing, I consume up to maybe 45 grams of this tapioca starch at morning, sometimes at evening additionally. So there is no, if you consume too much, it will be I mean no problem, just more short chain fatty acids will be produced in the gut, and you will feel even better, and no hunger. So again, my recommendation and my conclusion that better to use resistant starch, which is like tapioca starch in Thailand, and it can provide enough energy from the starch, and it is very healthy and very cheap, much cheaper than rice, for example. And as for oils, the best oil is oil which is high in saturated fat. It is like coconut oil, and beef fat, chicken fat to some extent, no, beef fat, and maybe a little bit no, it's all the plant-based oils are not healthy. Olive oil, but it is expensive and mostly fake, so I don't recommend it. Okay, so then again, my conclusion is that I recommend to consume at morning coconut oil together with resistant starch, and it gives it gives good charge of energy, and also it provides food for beneficial for friendly bacteria, and so that we can feel much better and So this is cheap, easy, and I recommend to follow this. Okay, that's all. Thank you for this your time. Take care.